Greetings everyone, welcome back to Blade Bias, and for the final follow-up video that I'll be filming in this little time that I have, we will be talking about the Thomas Balisong Aragon, another Balisong I've had for way too long, and quite honestly just haven't cared enough to talk about and prioritize it above anything else until now. So today, I'll be taking you through the about month that I've had the Aragon, and why I feel that it is just okay. Not great, and ultimately will probably fade into the background of my collection pretty quickly. So, before we get into it, the usual disclaimer, Thomas did send this Balisong over for the purpose of these videos that I've been making, but any and all opinions are my own. He did not influence them in any way, and I think you'll quickly figure out that that's the case as this video goes on. So, this is the Aragon, but you might notice that this is not how it looked when I first got it. Originally, it came with this blade, which, if you remember, this was a $326 titanium trainer from Amazon, which is even crazier that they include a live blade in here, because so many people complain about their Amazon Balisongs being taken down because of that they're sharp or whatever, and then a company goes and does it, and Amazon doesn't take them down. But if they did get taken down, I'm sure it would be a whole problem, and I don't know how they did this. I don't know how they included a live blade in a Amazon package, but they did, and it's here, and it's $326, which we'll talk about later. The Aragon with the trainer blade on was genuinely a Balisong that I just didn't enjoy. My first impressions didn't improve very heavily upon that. It was a very heavy feeling, sluggish feeling Balisong, coming in at only 4.66 ounces, which is heavy, but not really as heavy as it felt to flip. Especially since that blade, which I think is just so ugly. I really wish we would stop doing the filled in blades with tiny little holes throughout. Because, quite honestly with you, the other two times that I've seen it happen, both of these didn't flip very well. So, unfortunately, the case is still the same here. The blade has a ton of weight, or the trainer blade has a ton of weight, and not only did the actual flipping experience feel heavy and sluggish, but since that extra blade weight was there, it hesitated a lot going into fans and keeping momentum for fans. So it really didn't do any trick amazingly well in my eyes. It wasn't really a very impressive Balisong to begin with. So I initially was just going to leave it at that and then call it a day, but then I remembered that the live blade was in the package, and I liked the look of the live blade significantly more than I liked the trainer. I think this is a much more attractive looking Balisong with the live blade. So I broke out the old screwdriver and I replaced the blade on stream, which was really annoying because this hardware is atrocious. It's not good. I thought I stripped it 7 different times when I didn't. It's just that the screw heads are really shallow and you can't get a good grip on them, and they slip all of the time. I thought I turned the thing into a circle, but I look at it and it's still perfectly fine. My bit's still perfectly fine. My bits can still work on other Balisongs just fine, but these screws just kind of suck to work with, so getting them very tight or loosening them if they're very tight is just not a very easy endeavor. But thankfully the blade went on with no issues. I even used spare bushings in the box, just in there, and was able to put it back together with no tap, which, considering that those are likely untuned bushings, is pretty impressive. Still no tap. There might be a little bit if you shake it really hard, but the play is pretty noticeable. It's not the most notable tune I've ever felt in my life, especially for an Amazon titanium trainer. But the flipping with the live blade I initially thought was going to be much better because it feels more responsive in fans at least. And while that was the case for the first few days that I tried it, my my enjoyment of it quickly diminished to the point where I feel kind of the same way about it that I felt as the trainer blade, except I can recognize that it's slightly better. I believe the blade is slightly less heavy, also known as lighter, but it results in the fans feeling a little bit more responsive, especially when you first get into them. but the overall flipping experience still does feel very sluggish, very slow, very laggy. Mainly because of that weight, 4.66 ounces, which honestly isn't anything bad. Like the Arctic, I believe, is 4.5 ounces and feels significantly lighter and more responsive than this does. So I don't think a 4.6 ounce Balisong has to inherently feel laggy, but this does. It's just a lot of weight all over the place, which is pretty crazy considering that it's utilizing a small rectangular form factor similar to something like the Nemesis did. And the Nemesis is able to stay 0.3 ounces lighter, and in my opinion have a far, far better balance for cheaper. I believe the Nemesis now retails for $300, and a Balisong that I especially enjoy more than the Aragon, the Superfly, regularly retails for $300, but even often goes as low as something like $250. So while I don't think that the Aragon is inherently bad to begin with, I think there's just better value elsewhere, which is pretty crazy considering that this is a Chinese-made Balisong being sold under Marcolo on Amazon. And you can argue, oh, but you don't get the extra blade with those other options. And sure, that's fair, but I don't really see myself changing blades that often. You know, it's a cool novelty to have, but once you find the one that you prefer and the one that flips better, which in my opinion is the live blade, I don't really see myself going back and forth between them. But if you're someone who genuinely thinks that that is a legitimate reason to get this over them, then by all means, go ahead. So the flipping's laggy. The design overall is very sharp. While I like the looks of it overall, especially with the live blade, and I love this anodization, this beautiful blue with this kind of like blue into silver into yellow, gold, and then purple, kind of like a sunset fade on the inside of these like marks and these blue handles. I think it's a visually very beautiful ano, and I think that Balisong overall doesn't look bad, but I do think the machining could be improved upon here. It just overall feels very angular, very sharp. These cutouts, specifically these squares down here, running your hand along them does not feel very great. It's just a very unrefined feeling handle, which is a shame because it provides enough grip. Like, it provides more than enough grip because of how unfinished it feels, but unfortunately it's just not grip that you really need on a titanium product. So yeah, the Aragon didn't impress me that much. With the live blade on there, like I said, fans are a little bit more performant, but it still ultimately just feels heavy, it feels slow, it feels sluggish, and it feels like it just doesn't want to listen to what I want to do. It feels very, very laggy. And sometimes, like right there, sometimes it will just generate momentum out of nowhere. Every once in a while, it feels like a percentage chance, like 20% of the time, when I go to do a 0G chaplain or I go to like throw it around my index finger or something, it just flies away. Like, it generates a ton of momentum out of nowhere and it just flies, and it doesn't feel very good. I can recover from it most times, but like specifically the first kind of revolution around my finger for a 0G sometimes has to be incredibly scuffed in order for me to maintain control of the Balisong, which just doesn't feel great a lot of the time when a Balisong does something that you don't want it to. So the flipping overall leaves a bit to be desired for me. The design leaves a bit to be desired. The comfort leaves a bit to be desired. The weight, the tune, it just all is kind of a package that I'm just not very enamored by, to be completely honest with you. Especially at the price of $326, which, you know, I can get a Superfly not on sale for cheaper and on sale for way cheaper. And you can probably get a Nemesis, which is very similar. I believe NRB outsources to a Chinese manufacturer. I would pick these two any day. And you get the bonus of the Superfly being made in Canada. So it's at least North American made, if not US made, which I know is important to some people. But yeah, the Aragon, while really cool that it's a titanium trainer on Amazon, which really doesn't exist, I find the flipping, the design, everything overall to just be less than satisfactory to me. So it ultimately just gets beaten out by so many other things in my collection, including things cheaper than it. Things like the Sasori or the Orion or the Vulp or the Wing or something like that. And yeah, it just overall not my favorite thing ever. So I think that about does it. I think I've covered everything. I got the different blade, the hardware, the flipping. Um, I think if anything, maybe this will just become like an EDC that I carry for the express purpose of having a knife on me that I don't really care about that much. Because it's tough to EDC a Seraph when, like, if I lose that or something happens to it, that's not something I can re-get. Whereas this is something like, yeah, I wouldn't really mind. It would suck, but it wouldn't be a huge deal. But yeah, the Aragon, not my favorite. It's okay. I do want to make it clear. If you're into that kind of heavier, sluggish, laggy feeling experience, you might like this, but I find that it's more laggy than it really should be. I find it's a bad laggy rather than like a good kind of slower flipping experience. Because I've tried a lot of stuff in Will's collection, which kind of has a slower flipping experience that are still enjoyable. I don't find this to be terribly, terribly enjoyable. I find it to just be fighting me more often than not, or me just fighting to get enough momentum to do the trick that I want to do. So wow, it was a really loud drop. Actually, speaking of drops and durability, I have heard one unconfirmed report of someone saying that this live blade snapped on them, which I didn't see any pictures. I haven't seen any other reviewers have that issue. Granted, I haven't also seen any other reviews where someone has a live blade on it. So I can't confirm or deny that it even happened or that it's not a fluke or anything like that because this thing's only been flipped over carpet. But I did want to make that clear. I have heard someone say that their live blade snapped on this thing. So yeah, that's the Aragon. I want to thank Thomas for sending me this for these videos. Unfortunately, if you send me something, it doesn't mean I'm just going to like it immediately, because that's not the point of, sharing your opinion, your honest opinion on something. But I do really appreciate that you sent it out in the first place. Appreciate that you took the time to send me one out and everything. So thank you for that, Thomas. Really do appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. That's going to do it for me. Finally talked about the Aragon. Finally getting through the backlog. Buy a Superfly instead. Okay, bye. See ya.